Some things only grow when the world has given up on them. Padlock on the front door. A notice taped to the window. 72 years old. And the only home they know is no longer theirs. The landlord sold the building. Just like that. No warning that mattered. No time that was enough. They stand on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and 50 years of marriage between them. Their children call, begging them to move into a spare bedroom somewhere. But the old man looks at his wife, and she looks back, and something passes between them that doesn't need words. They find a county auction listing. An abandoned farm. Dead land. No roof on the house. Nobody else bids. They buy it for $3. Their names are Walter and June. And what June carries in the trunk of their car, packed in dusty glass jars, will change everything. But what did those jars actually contain? If the story moves you, follow along for more. The drive took 3 hours. Walter kept both hands on the wheel the whole time, which he only did when he was thinking hard. June sat in the passenger seat with a folded map on her lap even though the phone had directions. She didn't trust the phone. She never had. The car was a 2004 Buick with 160,000 miles on it, and it pulled slightly to the left, and the air conditioning hadn't worked in 2 summers. But it ran. And right now that was enough. They turned off the state road onto a gravel lane that hadn't been maintained in years. Weeds pushed through the stones. The fence posts along the property line were leaning or fallen. And then they saw it. The farmhouse sat at the end of the lane like something the land was trying to swallow. Half the roof was gone. The porch sagged on one side. The front door was still there, but it hung open on one hinge. Behind the house, a barn had collapsed entirely. Just a pile of old wood and rusted nails sitting in the grass. Walter stopped the car. He didn't turn it off right away. He just sat there looking at it. June said, "Well, it's ours." He nodded. Then he turned off the engine and got out. Now here's the thing you need to understand about Walter and June. They weren't dreamers. They weren't the kind of people who read inspirational books or watched videos about starting over. Walter had worked at the same printing plant for 34 years before it closed. June had been a school lunch lady for 22. They paid their rent on time every month for 31 years in the same apartment in Louisville. They never missed. Not once. And then a man they'd never met bought the building, gave them 60 days, and that was that. 31 years. 60 days. The math didn't make sense. But the law didn't care about math. Their son David called every day during those 60 days. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with his wife and 2 kids. He offered his living room. June said no. Their daughter Karen, down in Bowling Green, offered the same. June said no again. She wasn't being proud. She just knew. She knew that once they moved into someone else's house, they'd never leave. They'd sit in a corner and get smaller and smaller until there was nothing left. So when Walter found the auction listing in the county paper, he showed it to June. She read it twice. She looked at the price. She looked at the location. She said, "Let's go see it." They didn't go see it. There wasn't time. The auction was the next day. Walter bid $3 because it was what he had in his wallet without touching their food money. Nobody else bid. The county clerk looked at him like he was confused. Walter signed the papers and put the receipt in his shirt pocket. He would keep it there for a long time. Now he walked the property alone. June opened the trunk. Inside were 2 suitcases, a box of kitchen things, and 14 glass jars. The jars were old. Some had faded labels written in a careful hand. Some had no labels at all. June picked up the first jar and held it up to the light. Inside were seeds. Small, dry, brown seeds. She carried the jars to the porch one by one. Set them in a row on the sagging boards. Then she walked to the side of the house where the sun hit the ground directly, got on her knees, and started clearing the dirt with her bare hands. Walter came back from his walk. He stood behind her for a moment. Then he said, "The barn's gone, but the wood's still good." June didn't look up. She said, "Then we have wood." That night, David called. June answered. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. David said they were being reckless. He said they were too old. He said the place would kill them. June listened. Then she said, "We love you. Good night." And she hung up. Walter sat on the porch steps with the auction receipt in his hand. $3. He folded it, put it back in his shirt pocket. $3. That's what the world said this place was worth. He looked at June's jars, lined up on the porch railing. He didn't know what was in them. He didn't ask. He trusted her. 50 years teaches you when to ask and when to wait. That first night they slept in the car. The house wasn't safe yet. The floor in the front room had a hole big enough to fall through, and Walter wasn't sure the remaining section of roof would hold if the wind picked up. So they pushed the front seats back as far as they'd go and tried to sleep in the Buick with the windows cracked. June slept. Walter didn't. He sat there in the dark listening to the sounds of a place he didn't know yet. Owls. Wind in the tall grass. Something moving in the barn wreckage, probably a raccoon. He thought about the apartment. 31 years. The stain on the kitchen ceiling they'd reported 6 times. The radiator that clanked every winter. The view of the parking lot from the bedroom window. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. And now it wasn't. He looked over at June sleeping. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked peaceful. He thought, if she can sleep here, then I can work here. That's how it had always been between them. She carried the faith. He carried the lumber. In the morning, Karen called. She'd heard from David. She was calmer than her brother, but the message was the same. Come live with us. You're too old for this. June told her the same thing she told David. No. Karen didn't hang up angry. She just got quiet. And then she said, "Mama, I'm scared for you." June said, "I know, baby, but we're not scared. And that has to count for something." The next 6 weeks nearly broke them. Believe me, Walter started on the roof. He had no crew, no help, no scaffolding. He had a hammer, a box of nails he bought at a hardware store with money they couldn't spare, and the wood from the collapsed barn. Every morning he sorted through the pile. He checked each board, tapped it, bent it. If it held, he dragged it to the house. If it snapped, he threw it aside. He built a ladder from barn wood because he couldn't afford to buy one. He climbed it the first morning and his left knee buckled. He grabbed the gutter, which pulled loose from the house, and he fell 4 feet onto his back. He lay there for a full minute, staring at the sky, breathing through the pain. Then he got up and climbed again. By the second week, he had 3 beams across the open section of the roof. By the third week, he'd nailed enough boards across the beams to keep the rain out. It wasn't pretty. The boards didn't match. Some were gray with age. Some still had barn paint on them. But it held. Now get this. He fell again in the 4th week. This time from higher up. He hit his ribs on the edge of the porch railing on the way down. He felt something crack. Not break, but crack. The kind of crack that makes breathing hurt for weeks. He didn't tell June. He wrapped his ribs with a bedsheet, tight, and kept working. June noticed he was moving slower. She asked once if he was all right. He said he was fine. She looked at him the way she did when she knew he was lying but loved him too much to push. She went back to her garden. And the garden. Let me tell you about June's garden. She had cleared a patch of ground about 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. She worked it with a shovel they'd brought from the apartment and a rake she found in the remains of the barn. The soil was hard, packed, gray in places where nothing had grown in years. She dug it up, turned it over, broke the clumps apart with her hands. Then she opened the jars. She told Walter about them one evening while they sat on the porch. Her mother had taught her to save seeds. Every season, her mother would take seeds from the best plants and dry them and store them in jars. Her grandmother had done the same before that. It went back generations. June had kept the habit her whole life, even in the apartment. She saved seeds from tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash, herbs, flowers. Anything she could grow in pots on the windowsill, she saved the seeds from. And the oldest jar, the one with the faded label in her mother's handwriting. Those seeds went back to plants her mother had grown in 1961. Her mother had handed her that jar on her wedding day and said, "Don't you ever throw these away. Someday they'll save you." Everyone thought it was hoarding. David once joked about it at Thanksgiving. Karen had offered to clean out the jars twice. June smiled and kept them. Now she planted them, row by row, jar by jar. She marked each row with a stick and a piece of torn cloth so she'd remember which seeds went where. She watered them from the well behind the house, carrying buckets back and forth until her shoulders ached. The first season, nothing grew. Not one thing. Not a sprout. Not a leaf. The ground stayed brown and empty. June checked every morning. She knelt in the dirt and looked and waited, and there was nothing. David drove down from Louisville on a Saturday. He hadn't told them he was coming. He pulled up in his truck and sat in the cab for a long time just looking at the place. Then he got out. He saw Walter on the roof, limping. He saw June on her knees in the dirt. He stood between them and something broke inside him. "Dad, Mom, please." Walter climbed down. June stood up. "Look at this place," David said. "Look at you. Dad, you're limping. Mom, you're in the dirt. For what? Nothing's growing. Nothing's going to grow." June wiped her hands on her pants. She didn't say anything. David's voice cracked. "You're throwing away whatever years you have left on a dead piece of land." That one landed. Walter saw it hit June like something physical. She took a breath. Then she went inside the house. She came back holding a jar. The oldest one. The label was faded, almost white. The handwriting was barely visible. Her mother's hand. She held it up. "Your grandmother gave me this the day I married your father," she said. "Don't throw these away. Someday they'll save you." "I haven't thrown them away. I'm not going to throw them away now." David looked at the jar. He looked at his mother. He looked at the empty field. He couldn't say anything else. He got in his truck and drove back to Louisville. He didn't call for 2 weeks. That night was quiet. The roof was mostly done. The field was empty. The air had cooled. June sat on the porch with the jar in her lap. Walter sat beside her. They could hear crickets and nothing else. Walter said, "Maybe tomorrow something will come up." June nodded. They sat together in the silence. And for a moment it felt like maybe this was enough. The two of them. This porch. This quiet. Even if nothing ever grew. Even if the farm stayed dead. Just the two of them sitting together after 50 years would be enough. It was the most peaceful night they'd had since the eviction. June leaned her head against Walter's shoulder. He put his hand on hers. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. But peace doesn't last. Not when you're 72 and the world hasn't finished with you yet. The letter came on a Tuesday. Walter walked to the mailbox at the end of the gravel lane. There were 2 pieces of mail. One was a flyer for a feed store 40 miles away. The other was from the county tax office. He opened it standing right there at the mailbox. The property they'd bought at auction carried delinquent taxes from the previous owner. The county had sold the land, but not the debt. Walter and June now owed $1,412 in back taxes. They had 90 days to pay. If they didn't, the county would seize the property and sell it again. Walter read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it and put it in his coat pocket. He walked back to the house. June was already in the garden, kneeling, planting a new round of seeds from different jars. He didn't tell her. Now here's the thing. Their Social Security checks came to $840 a month combined. After food, gas, and the few supplies they needed, there was nothing left. $1,400 might as well have been $14 million. Walter started looking for work in town. And I want you to picture this. A 72-year-old man with cracked ribs he's never had treated, walking into hardware stores and feed shops and asking if anyone needs help. Most people looked at him and looked away. A few were kind. A farmer named Hicks needed his fence line repaired. He paid Walter $60 for 2 days of work. A woman on Route 9 needed her porch railing fixed. She paid him $40. Walter came home every night exhausted. His hands bled. His ribs screamed. He told June he was just helping neighbors. She accepted it. Or seemed to. One evening he came home and found June sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook. She'd written down every dollar they had, every dollar they'd spent, every dollar they would need. She'd done the math without him. She didn't say anything about it. She just left the notebook open on the table where he'd see it. Walter looked at the numbers. He sat down across from her. Neither of them spoke. The numbers said what words couldn't. They were running out of time and money at the same speed. Meanwhile, June planted her second season. She chose different jars this time. She rotated the rows. She worked compost into the soil from a pile she'd started with kitchen scraps and dead leaves. She talked to the ground while she worked. Not in words Walter could hear, just quiet sounds, almost like humming. She had a system now. She soaked the seeds overnight in water before planting. She spaced them differently. She studied which parts of the field got the most sun and which held water longest after rain. She was learning the land the way you learn a person. Slowly, by paying attention. 6 weeks in, the well pump failed. It just stopped. Walter went out one morning to fill the buckets and nothing came up. He opened the pump housing and found the seals had rotted through. The motor was burned out. A new pump cost $300 they didn't have. Walter drove to a junkyard 20 miles away. He spent an entire day picking through scrap. He found parts from 2 different pump systems that he thought could work. He paid $11 for the lot. Took him 3 days to rebuild the pump. His hands were so stiff by the 3rd day he could barely grip the wrench. But on the 3rd evening he primed it, hit the switch and water came up. Brown at first, then clear. June never knew how close they'd come to losing the water. But she found the tax letter. She was washing his coat. She felt the paper in the pocket. She pulled it out and read it. And she walked out to where he was stacking firewood, and she stood in front of him and held up that letter and said nothing. Walter stopped. He looked at the letter. He looked at her face. "I was going to tell you," he said. When I had the money." "We don't have the money, Walter. I'm working on it. $60 at a time? With broken ribs you think I don't know about." That one stopped him cold. She'd known. Of course she'd known. 50 years. "You don't hide things from me," she said. "Not now. Not after everything. We figure it out together or we don't figure it out at all." He nodded. She was right. She was always right about the things that mattered. They had 47 days left. They needed over $1,000. They had no plan. Then, one morning, June walked out to the garden and stopped. She stood perfectly still for a long time. Then she called Walter's name. Not loud, not urgent. Just his name, spoken once, the way she'd said it 10,000 times in 50 years. He came out. He limped to where she was standing. And he saw it. One row. Just one. The 3rd row from the left. Green shoots breaking through the dirt. Small. Tender. Bright green against the brown. They were real. They were alive. Something was growing. June put her hand over her mouth. Walter put his arm around her. They stood there looking at that one row of green, and neither of them spoke, because some moments don't need words. They need silence. They need respect. But the deadline was 43 days away, and green shoots don't pay taxes. The 3rd season is when everything changed. And I need you to hear this part carefully because what happened on that farm is the kind of thing that doesn't happen. Except it did. June's garden came alive. Not just the one row. All of it. Every jar she'd planted from. Every row she'd marked with sticks and cloth. The ground broke open with green. Plants pushed up in shapes and colors that Walter had never seen. Leaves that were wider than his hand. Stalks that grew so fast June started measuring them with a piece of string every morning. But here's what made it strange. June didn't recognize most of them either. The seeds from her mother's oldest jars, the ones from the 1960s and earlier, they grew into plants that didn't look like anything in the stores. Tomatoes that were nearly black. Beans that curled in spirals. A squash with skin the color of rust. Peppers so small they looked like berries. Corn with dark red kernels. A neighbor drove by one afternoon, slowed down, stopped. He walked to the fence and stared. "What are you growing over there?" June said, "I'm not entirely sure." The neighbor told his wife. His wife mentioned it to a woman at church. That woman's brother-in-law worked at the county extension office. And the extension office had a relationship with the state university. That's how Dr. Carolyn Ellis heard about the farm. Dr. Ellis was a botanist at the University of Kentucky. She specialized in heirloom seed preservation. She'd spent 20 years documenting plant varieties that were disappearing from American agriculture. She had a database of over 4,000 known heirloom species, and a much longer list of species that were classified as lost, gone, extinct from commercial farming and, as far as anyone knew, extinct from the earth. She drove 4 hours to see June's garden. She didn't call ahead. She just showed up on a Thursday afternoon in a dusty car with a leather notebook on the passenger seat. Walter was on the porch. He watched her get out. She was maybe 50. Glasses, practical shoes. She walked to the edge of the garden and stopped. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she opened her notebook and started walking the rows. She knelt. She touched the leaves. She took out a small knife and cut a cross-section of a stem. She held it up to the light. She moved to the next row and did the same thing. She was there for 2 hours. When she finally came to the porch, her eyes were red. "Who planted this?" she asked. "My wife," Walter said. "Where did she get these seeds?" "From her mother." Dr. Ellis sat down on the porch steps. She opened her notebook and turned it so Walter could see. She had written a list. 17 entries. Next to each one she had written 2 words. "Believed extinct." "Sir," she said, "your wife's garden contains 17 plant species that the scientific community classified as permanently lost. We thought they were gone from the earth. They are growing in your field." Walter looked at the list. He didn't understand most of the names. He called June. June came from around the side of the house, dirt on her knees, a trowel in her hand. Dr. Ellis stood up. She looked at June. And then she did something Walter would never forget. She started crying. "Ma'am," Dr. Ellis said, "may I see the jars?" June brought them out. All 14. She lined them up on the porch railing. Dr. Ellis went through them one by one, reading the faded labels, opening the lids, looking inside. When she reached the oldest jar, the one with June's mother's handwriting, she held it with both hands like it was made of glass, which, of course, it was, but something more than glass. "This," Dr. Ellis said, "this is the most important collection of seeds I have ever seen in my career. Now, if this story has meant something to you so far, I'd ask you to subscribe. That's all. Just subscribe so you don't miss how this ends." Within 2 weeks, the farm was no longer quiet. Dr. Ellis contacted her department. Her department contacted 3 seed preservation organizations. The organizations contacted their networks. People started coming. Researchers from 2 universities. An organic farming collective from Vermont. A man from the USDA who flew in from Washington. A woman from a global seed vault in Norway who made the trip just to document what June had. They walked the rows. They took samples. They photographed every plant. They tested the soil. They tested the seeds still in the jars. The results confirmed everything. June's collection contained 17 plant species the scientific community had given up on. Varieties that hadn't been grown commercially in over 60 years. Varieties that had been erased by industrial agriculture, by pesticides, by the simple march of efficiency over diversity. And here they were, growing on a dead piece of land in Kentucky, planted by a 72-year-old woman who'd been saving seeds in jars because her mother told her to. The grants started coming. First a small one from the university, then a larger one from a National Preservation Fund, then a federal research grant. The tax debt was paid. The property was secured. A team from the university offered to help Walter finish the repairs on the house. He let them fix the plumbing and the electrical. He wouldn't let them touch the roof. That was his. An independent appraiser came out to assess the property. Not the land. Not the house. The biological material growing on it. The value of what June's seeds had produced. He spent 3 days on the assessment. The farm was valued at over $6 million. For a property they bought for $3. David called that night. June answered. He was crying. He couldn't get the words out at first. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." June held the phone against her ear and closed her eyes. "You don't need to be sorry, baby. You were scared. So were we." A documentary crew showed up in October. They were making a film about seed preservation and food heritage, and June and Walter's story had become the center of it. They spent 5 days at the farm. They filmed the rows. They filmed the jars. They filmed the house with its patchwork roof. On the last day, the director sat Walter and June down on the porch for a final interview. The camera was rolling. The sun was low. The fields stretched out behind them, rows and rows of green and gold and deep red. The director asked Walter, "Why didn't you quit after the first season? Nothing grew. Your son begged you to stop. Why did you stay?" Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he put his arm around June. And he said, "Because she told me the seeds just needed time. And 50 years of marriage taught me that when this woman says wait, you wait." The director turned to June. "And the seeds? How did you know they'd grow?" June reached behind her and picked up a jar from the porch railing. The oldest one. Her mother's. The label was almost gone. The glass was cloudy. But the seeds inside were still there. She held it up. "Mama said never throw these away. She said someday they'd save us." She looked out at the fields. She looked at the farmhouse with its roof of mismatched barn wood. She looked at Walter. His 72-year-old hands, scarred and swollen from the work they'd done. She looked at all of it. Mama was right. The crew left. The researchers would come and go for months. The grants continued. The farm became a living seed bank, the most important small agricultural preservation site in the country. Universities sent students every semester. Farmers came from other states to learn about heirloom seed saving. June taught them the way her mother had taught her, patiently, with jars. David drove down the following weekend. This time he didn't sit in the truck. He got out, walked straight to his mother, and held her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he walked to the garden and asked June to show him how to plant. She handed him a jar and pointed to an empty row. He knelt in the dirt in his good pants and didn't care. Karen came the next day with her kids. They ran through the rows laughing, and June let them. For the first time in over a year, the whole family was on the same piece of ground. Not fighting, not worrying, just together. Walter fixed the porch that week. He replaced the sagging boards with new lumber the university team had brought. When he was done, he set out 2 chairs and a small table. He put June's jars on the table in a row, the way she liked them. It looked like home. It was home. But the thing I keep thinking about is something that happened after all of it. After the cameras and the scientists and the $6 million number. It was a quiet afternoon in late spring. A school group visited the farm. 20 kids, maybe 9 or 10 years old, walking the rows in rubber boots with a teacher trying to keep them from touching everything. One girl broke away from the group. She walked up to June, who was kneeling at the end of a row, checking the soil. The girl was small. Glasses. Serious face. She said, "How did you know they would grow?" June looked at her. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a jar. A new one. Clean glass. A fresh label written in June's own handwriting. She unscrewed the lid and poured a handful of seeds into the girl's cupped hands. "You don't know," June said. "You just don't throw them away." The girl looked at the seeds. She looked at June. She closed her hands around them and walked back to her group. Walter was watching from the porch. He had his coffee. He had his chair. He had the auction receipt in his shirt pocket, same as always. $3. He took it out, looked at it. The paper was soft now, worn at the folds. He put it back. Below him, June stood up from the row and stretched her back. She looked at the house. She looked at him. She smiled. He smiled back. 50 years. 2 suitcases. 14 jars. $3. A dead piece of land that wasn't dead at all. It was waiting. The way good things do. The way seeds do. The way love does, when it's had enough time. Some things only grow when the world has given up on them. Walter and June were proof of that. So was the farm. So were the seeds. And somewhere, a 10-year-old girl with glasses was walking home with a handful of something she'd never throw away.